the northern shores and woodlands to the west, it's history. From copper mines and iron ore, the Great Lakes fishery, to the farmlands of the southern counties and east to Chesapeake Bay. Look at all that waits the sportsman across the USA. And sometimes when the moon brings out the diamonds in the snow, the stillness of the forest is encased in Arctic cold. The wind might whisper through the trees, listen to it say the beauty of our great outdoors across the USA.
Hi there, come on in. On this program, we're going to give the scent story, what we've been doing a series on for the past few weeks, a break, and we're going to go back to some of the basics of hunting deer. The things you should look for in the woods, the sign that deer leave, that if you can find this and narrow your odds, you're going to be a more effective hunter. We're also going to take a look at bow camp, where we were this past weekend up in Houghton Lake, Michigan. Oh, I wish we could have found more deer sign up there. It was slim pickings, but we had a good time. We're going to tell you about that, a great recipe, so stay tuned. I'm Fred Trost. It's time for Outdoor Digest. Here you go. Ooh, that's going to be hard to beat.
When she starts looking good, that means it's time for us to go.
Tall tales, jokes, and plenty of serious discussions around the campfire are all a part of what we call camaraderie among hunters. We get to know each other, share ideas and skills. Chipping flint arrowheads like the Indians used to do is one of Norm Blaker's hobbies. Norm is a traditional archer, a longbow shooter who successfully hunts with the arrowheads that he chips himself.
When you get this flint chip down to this stage, how do you get those little? You can't bang those out with that.
No. You take the deer antler, and you press out those flakes from side to side like this.
And they're coming off the bottom again.
Yes. It's the same basic thing as the percussion blow, only it's called pressure flicking, and it's a little more precise. You can shape it and finish it and sharpen it to its final stages.
How do you attach this to your cedar shaft?
Okay, what I usually do is cut a little slot in there and put the point in. You can do it without glue, but it's a known fact that the Indians had all kinds of fish glues and hide glues and...
After a few days at our Houghton Lake bow camp with Norm Blaker, you really get to appreciate his ideals and his love of traditional values and customs. And when you spend time around fellas like this, some of it starts to rub off. Norm Blaker and Ron LeClaire turned me on to longbows at a time when most archers use the high-tech compound bows. Kathy Beitler's dad, Gleason, finds a compound is easier to hold back, a real help to many older hunters. But still, we like to pit our skills against each other, longbows versus compounds.
There she goes.
Right down the rack.
Kathy Beitler's compound plunks a bullseye in her challenge to Norm Blaker.
That's it. You take it.
How about that one?
Good shot. Hang on just a second before you go down and get him. Glease always gets his in a 1-inch circle. So Glease, we're going to take one of the upper corners here.
Okay.
Huh?
Okay.
Because if you miss,
Or how about on
No.
3 circles and see if we can hit all 3 circles?
I don't have that many arrows.
Oh, you only... How many arrows you have?
Just one.
Just one. Well, I got to do it the first time.
Okay,
right?
which upper right or upper left?
You call it.
Upper right. Better not miss. Oh, you were lucky. You were lucky. Okay, I'm going to step in and
Step on your
try to get it in the center.
You gonna what?
I'm going to get it in the center of that bullseye. Huh? Mr. Gleason?
Pretty good.
What'd you think of that?
I got my knot. Not quite.
Well, that's shooting for fun at bow camp. But in the woods, we hunt deer individually, picking our blinds near trails, sitting for several hours alone each morning and evening. Indian summer in late October has kept the deer bedded during the day, and in my scouting for a better spot, I ran across some fellows in a bow camp a mile away who had taken the time to dig and build elaborate ground blinds. Eric Nyko from Houghton Lake was a bunker engineer in the Army, and he knew how to build a comfortable pit blind. Now, this is on state land in a parcel that's not heavily hunted, especially since I'm not going to reveal exactly where it is. But Eric was nice enough to let me use it for the evening.
Oh boy, this looks good. It's supposed to come out from that side, right across here. Just have to keep alert. This ground blind has a lot of advantages in this situation. One thing, a ground blind that is, well, this is about, 4 feet deep. The fellas came and dug it out, and they reinforced the walls with logs. It's about 4 feet deep, has about a foot here of space for visibility and for shooting a bow through here. And the roof is made of plastic and ferns on top, so it's natural looking from the outside. But there's a couple big advantages of a ground blind like this. One, your scent is held in, so even if the wind is blowing towards the direction the deer are going to come, the scent is going to tend to be held inside here, or maybe go straight up because of the low pressure area created by this blind. Now, a second thing that I like about ground blinds like this is that you're shooting level with the deer, so your arrow has the best chance of making a vital, clean, humane kill because you're shooting right level with the ground. Now, this is setting on the edge of a swamp. You can see out here, this is swamp out here. And the deer tend to funnel between the swamp and this little stand of trees here. Right over to our right, maybe 200 yards, is a rye field, a big rye field that was planted by the Department of Natural Resources as a habitat improvement. And that tends to feed the deer. They're attracted to that. It's a lot of green rye for them to feed on. So we have the rye field there, deer filtering through, ideal setup. It's 5:30. We can shoot till probably about 7. So we'll just have to keep our eyes open, see if we can spot the deer as they filter through here.
We knew a buck had filtered through. He rubbed a sapling with his antlers in front of the blind, and it was fairly fresh. But with days reaching 75 degrees, the deer weren't moving in the daylight. They waited for darkness when it was cool. And wouldn't you know it, just when the light was almost gone, after 6:35, nearly 6:45, a doe wandered through and stopped to munch carrots in front of our blind, 15 yards away. But I waited for the buck that had to be behind her. She wandered off, and the buck never showed up.
How'd you like the tent back there?
The next morning, I stopped by Eric's bow camp to find that no one had been successful there all weekend. But thanks to Eric and his buddies for letting us use their secret blind, and to Mike Ignat and the Houghton Lake Chamber of Commerce that hosted our bow camp, we spent a weekend the way we like best, among our bow hunting friends.
Bow hunting, well, all forms of hunting aren't always successful. Same goes with fishing. And you know, a lot of the sportsmen who come up with the big ones, it's just luck. That does play a big part of it. And that's how a number of these sportsmen made it in our trophy book.
Dick Rayo has a dandy perch, a 1 pound 15 ouncer. He caught it on a jack's hook. Now here's a 13-pound, 3-ounce walleye. John Moldowan caught it while he was anchored. And Edward Lufkus caught this carp that weighed 28 1/4 pounds. Janice Wilson caught this 19 1/4 pound steelhead while she was trolling. And here's Mike Bassino's 11-point buck. It had an 18 1/4 inch spread. Now, William Bergbacher's huge buck had 14 points and a 24 1/2 inch spread. It was massive, weighed 192 pounds. Craig Mason tagged this monster gobbler that had a 10 1/2 inch beard. And oh my gosh, Larry Kostanecki has a buck, a big 10-pointer at 195 pounds that had a 19-inch spread. Looks like a dandy right out of a big cedar swamp.
That's correct. This is a swamp buck. I had a real good bow season. I got my deer in 15 minutes. I got skunk bear season, did good walleye. I got this opening day, and it took me 11 hours to get them out. So I paid.
Back in the swamp.
Yeah, it took me 11 hours to get this one out.
So tell me, would you do it again? Would you hunt back there again?
Oh, yeah, in a minute.
I agree, Larry Kostanecki. In fact, I'd throw on my hip boots and go back there in a minute, too. Bucks like that are hard to come by, and that's why we'll make you our Outdoor Digest Trophy Buck Hunter of the Week. One of the most spectacular wildlife transplants took place several years ago between the Canadian province of Ontario and the state of Michigan. 29 moose were shot from helicopters by a veterinarian using tranquilizing darts. The moose were then thoroughly examined, medicated, and prepped for the flight of a lifetime to a staging area where they were crated and loaded on a truck to Michigan's Upper Peninsula. There they are doing extremely well, and with only 30 other moose added 2 years later, that herd now numbers over 200 animals. But Michigan does not have an exclusive on moose success stories. New Hampshire, where moose were actually at one time endangered, now has an estimated population of 4,000. In fact, they were even able to hold a hunting season last year, taking 57 moose. Carefully controlled moose hunts are now held in Colorado, Idaho, Montana, Maine, Minnesota, Utah, and Wyoming. And Vermont, which does not yet allow hunting for moose, reckons that they'll have more than 800 moose at the end of this year. Now, the cause for this moose increase across the country can be directly related to changing habitat, more clear-cutting and regrowth of forests that offer moose much to eat. It's an important factor for an animal that weighs over a half a ton and eats 40 to 50 pounds of leaves, twigs, and plants every day. And because of this better habitat, moose are making a spectacular comeback.
What signs should hunters begin looking for to find deer? Well, the most obvious is their tracks.
Old tracks, quite old.
Yeah, very old.
Must have been muddy because they're sunk down into the sand quite a bit.
And they've lost all definition. I mean, but it rained last night.
Oh, look right here.
Yeah, this is
right here.
This has been made sometime between 8 and 9 o'clock last night and now. So this track and this that's a nice big track there. You notice it's well defined. The rain
over here
hasn't blurred.
we have even some better ones.
Yeah, some really good ones.
Right there. So this is a fresh track because it rained last night. We know a deer was in the area.
It's several hours old because you can see where the earth has been pushed up. It's lost. There's no moisture in it. The sand is just completely dried away.
But this track is fresher than this track.
Oh yeah, this track was. You can see it's been blurred by the rain. So this was made before last night, whereas this has been made since last night. But again, same here. But again, this isn't anything to get excited about because it tells you that the deer are here and they're coming in probably at night. But as far as getting too excited, you'd see tracks like this all over
the place.
if it was all
Well, tracks are the easiest deer sign to find, but deer leave tracks everywhere they walk, day and night. So tracks alone don't give you a big clue as to their behavior, and neither do another common sign, the droppings.
But there they are.
And like you said, they're reasonably fresh because you can see they're shiny, and that mucilaginous covering deteriorates very, very quickly. So when you find fresh droppings like that are still wet and shiny, particularly on a warm, windy day like that, you know they were made just a few hours ago.
It helps to know if tracks and droppings are fresh. Now that tells you that the deer have been active during daylight and these aren't just night areas. But Glenn Dutterer and I wanted to find more definitive deer sign, more particularly buck sign, because that's what we're after. And we'll find it even though we're on a corner bordered by 2 county roads.
The road doesn't bother the deer?
No.
Okay, we got the swamp right over there.
That's my first hint, is I'm looking for a place that deer can go that I know hunters typically aren't going to follow, and I know that's a wet, swampy area, and hunters just don't bother it. So that's component one, a refuge.
The deer are obviously using that swamp now.
Oh yes, sure, it's a good, safe place to go. It's a place to be away from disturbance for whatever reason.
Okay, now up here on the high ground we have some looks like some balsam or some fir trees here. These berries aren't worth anything to deer.
Well, they'll nibble on them. I mean,
nibble on the berries?
Sure, these are crab apples of different species, and they'll nibble on that, and if not, they'll certainly nibble on the branches of the apple. I mean, this is typical southern Michigan deer habitat, and it's great. The swamp, then a row of spruce, and then here's a row of apple trees loaded with apples, and then over there's a nice dense stand of young trees under that oak, so there's a place to feed and eat.
But this to me looks like a big attraction to the deer right here, the strip of Scotch pines.
Sure, yeah, covered bridge, a protected travel way. They can move a long distance through this kind of habitat and be relatively undisturbed.
Let's go up here. We can. Yeah, they like to bed down.
Yeah, this tall grass is excellent bedding, and depending on which way the wind's blowing, that pine is going to give them.
Okay, look at this trail here. Look at this trail here, OJ. This is. You can see where they've come from the pines, and you can see that very definitely. Has come right down through here, and it leads right through here. You can see in between the crab apples where the leaves are tromped down. When you stand back as you're walking, you can see this easily.
Yeah, that's what you want to look for is the pattern in relation to all the other things, and not start concentrating on hoof prints, but these general relationships.
Now,
patterns.
Buck rubs don't mean a heck of a lot to me because bucks are all over and they make rubs all over, but they're still fun to see.
Yeah, well, you said it best a few years ago. A buck rub means a buck rubbed his antlers there. He ain't necessarily going to do it there again.
Now, you're not going to find buck rubs on the pine trees. We didn't see any on the crab apples there, but on these little aspens is where we'll look right up ahead here.
There's an excellent example. And some old ones and some fresh ones we can point out too. A nice new one, probably done in August. Here's one that's done fairly recently. The wood's just beginning to dry out. And then here's one, of course, that was done last year, maybe even the year before that.
The bigger the rub, the bigger the deer generally.
Well, I don't know any research to back that up, but
come on, everybody knows that, Glenn.
That's a wide-held opinion, and I won't argue with it.
Okay, we'll find some other rubs. About all of these trees have been hit. Now, some of these are old, but look at this right here.
Yeah. And everybody say, hey, 3-inch tree that high, it's got to be a big deer. And I'd argue this in favor of that. If a deer's going to rub that high, it had to be a pretty big deer to start with.
Every tree that I see in here, every little sapling, even some of the big ones like this right here, have been rubbed.
And why they tend to prefer these stands, I don't know. But typically, this is where you look. And we looked here, this is what we found. We were looking for it.
Okay, I'd say this thick stuff right here is a big attraction for the deer, this trail, because of this field.
Sure. Let's start looking for travel lanes through here, heavily used travel lanes. But this is a little secluded spot, so this is where I say, hey, there's probably scrapes in here. And that's what I tend to be more attracted to and say, this is where I'll probably hunt.
So the deer can walk along here and overlook. See, the wind is coming up right here from the lowland up the ridge here during the day. So they get a good scent of anything that's happening down there. A lot of use. Okay, right up here is a scrape.
It's in the kind of area that I look for these kinds of scrapes. There's some vegetation overhead. It's kind of secluded. And what would excite me, as you can see, this was done last night. The soil's still loosely plowed. Here's a footprint. You can see where he had his hind feet and was pushing. You can see where he's clipped these branches off. And if I come back and check this again and find this same pattern, then it's a scrape. What you might do just to make sure that you've got an active scrape is take a twig, something you don't get the scent on it, and just throw some leaves or pine needles on it like that. And boy, if that's gone the next day or two, he's tending this scrape regularly. And so it's what I would call an active scrape. And I would want to be somewhere around here, but not right on it, a few yards off that way or that way. And this is probably the trail that he uses to come in here. Notice it's not heavily used. And what that suggests to me is this is one animal, probably a buck, coming in here, making this scrape, tending this area, early in the morning, late in the evening.
Well, let's follow up here and see where he would maybe go. Now look, now here's an area where deer can go through. It's only this high and it has these prickly multiflora rows, but they duck right down and go scoot right underneath there.
That buck likes the thick stuff. He isn't taking the easy way through.
And that's typically where you find them, in very thick cover, not too far from a primary scrape. And they usually get into that cover before it gets light and stay there until dark.
Where would you suppose he beds down?
Right there.
Right here?
Mm-hmm. Somewhere rattling through this thicket is one of his major bedding areas.
Bedding areas, scrapes, rubs, trails, tracks, droppings. They're all clues to the daily habits of white-tailed deer, and when you read the habitat, use natural camouflage for a blind, and position yourself in a way that you're downwind from where you think the deer is likely to come, then you've got a good deer blind. Don't be afraid to move if conditions change, and you'll have the best chance of at least seeing deer, or maybe a buck, and that makes a day in the woods all worthwhile.
Gene Leonard sent us a recipe for stuffed venison loaf that was a winner in our recipe contest.
And you wouldn't guess that something as bland and ordinary
basic, that's right,
as meatloaf. But of course, she starts off tossing potato chips in.
That's different. Get your celery and onions. You can go ahead and mix up your just regular mixture like you would for meatloaf. And then this has got the croutons in it that you use in a stuffing mix. And you're going to add your butter and water to this. Now, since we've done this recipe, I have tried this with the stovetop stuffing, and it's not nearly as good as it is this way. This stays just a little bit drier, and it is better.
Yeah. We're going to wrap stuffing in burger
inside of venison
and win a contest with it. This is
and
incredible.
It does work. And it stays moist that way. I think that the stuffing keeps the burger from drying out.
It would. The trick with venison burger is really don't worry so much about putting fat in it, but make sure you have the venison fat primarily out
removed,
of it, especially the connective tissue.
Right.
Too many people take that venison burger, to a butcher and have them grind everything
up.
up.
And it does make a difference.
That's a mistake. But this venison burger, quality stuff, wrapped around the stuffing.
It's a meal in one.
Can you imagine how many people wished right now they were in Bob Garner's shoes?
It's a good moist meatloaf. You can't really beat it. I'm not really nuts about meatloafs. But if you put in the stuffing mix, this is really nice.
You're not nuts about meatloaf?
No.
I would have never guessed that. Knowing you all these years, seeing you eat all these recipes, I can't believe that.
Well, what I'm saying is that when it gets to meatloaf recipes, they're all fairly basic.
You've probably eaten a lot of them.
I've eaten a lot of meatloaf recipes. I mean, who didn't? Geez, when we grew up, hamburger was a staple.
Yeah.
And so then you get to a recipe like this, though. It's got stuffing in it. It's a lot more moist. Change your old
meal in one.
This horseradish and the ketchup, I think, is great.
Yeah, just about any kind of topping. It won't hurt it at all.
Oh, I put cocktail sauce on mine. It's about the same thing. It's really good.
This is old horseradish, so you can use a lot.
Hey, can you imagine, too, the next day having a slice of this between maybe 2 slices of homemade bread?
I knew he loved meatloaf, and this is a great recipe.
Stuffed venison loaf. Oh, if you're short on venison, use hamburger. You'll love it.
That wraps up another edition of Outdoor Digest. We will continue the scent story in a couple weeks, maybe next week, maybe the week after, whenever we get our results back from the lab that tells what was in those bottles. So we have that coming up, a lot of great features. I hope you enjoyed it, but above all, get outdoors this weekend if you can. It's a great place to be. See you next week.
Next week, we're hoping to have our reports back from Chicago, the laboratory that is analyzing those deer scents to see if we can find out what's actually in those bottles. I don't know if we're going to have that report or not, but we will have a rundown on deer season 1989. Check out the hot spots, see what the forecast looks like in our annual show. A great recipe, venison curry, all that next week. So join me right here on public television. It's supposed to come out from that side.